Understanding musical intervals. Part 1. The key to understanding how to use chords, modes, and scales is to first understand how musical intervals work, and the fun and interesting relationships between them. A musical interval is just the distance between any two notes. There are 12 possible musical intervals in an octave, but there are more intervals. However, we will discuss those jazzy ninths and fancy 14ths in another video. Intervals can be horizontal, if they are melodic and played sequentially. Or they can be vertical, if they are harmonic and played simultaneously, like playing a chord. There are 5 categories, or interval qualities, if you want to be a fancy music theory nerd. They are the perfect, major, minor, augmented, and diminished intervals. Unisons and octaves are pretty easy. They are the perfect ones and perfect eighths. Because it's the same note, you might think of somewhere over the rainbow. A perfect fourth is formed by going up 5 half steps from your starting note. For example, between D and G, you might think of Here Comes the Bride. A perfect fifth is formed by going up 7 half steps from your starting note. For example, between A and E, you might think of the main Star Wars Overture theme. That is all of the perfect intervals. One thing to note is that the inverse of a perfect interval will also be perfect. This mainly applies to the fourth and fifth. This means that going up a fifth will lead to the same note as going down a fourth, just an octave apart. If you start with an E and go up a fifth, then you will end at A, B. However, if you go back to that E and, instead, go down a fourth, then you will also end at B. One octave below the B from going up. An interesting thing to note is that in between the perfect fourths and perfect fifths is an interval that's pretty far from perfect sounding, which is the tritone. The tritone is 6 half steps or 3 whole steps, as in 3 tones, hence the name tritone, away from the starting note. It is the only interval to be 2 intervals at once, meaning it can also be 2 notes at once, called an enharmonic note, for people that argue about music theory more than make music. It is, ironically enough, sometimes considered the most dissonant of the intervals, but it could also be the brightest. More on that will come in a future video. The tritone can be either an augmented fourth or a diminished fifth, depending on the context. This also means they are the only augmented and diminished intervals found in the normal 7-note diatonic scales, used in most modern and Western music.